Well, the midterm elections are here, and once again, the usual suspects, the corporate giants, are funding ballot initiatives. There are GMO labeling propositions, for example, in Oregon and Colorado, and Monsanto Corporation, along with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they are spending millions of dollars on ad campaigns urging people to vote no on GMO labeling. They say the labeling will hurt local farmers and the economy. Greg Palast, I'd love to get your take on this. I mean, come on, Monsanto, do you think they're really concerned about family farmers?
No, but they're really concerned about Monsanto and their robo farms. I mean, Monsanto is, of course, they're selling seeds that are genetically modified, and they sell like Roundup ready soy. What that means is that you can dump a bunch of chemical pesticide called Roundup on the soybean, and supposedly it isn't ingested into that bean. The problem is that Monsanto not only tries to control the ballot box, they try to control the science. In an investigation I did for The Guardian, I found out that Monsanto, for example, in the analysis of their hormone, BST, which is used to get cows to produce more milk, they gave the Food and Drug Administration tests which showed that there was no problems after 6 weeks of ingesting food and that had BST. What they didn't include, and some scientists from England found in the computer tapes, was that after 6 weeks, if you add a couple more weeks, weeks 7 and 8, cows started having pus in their milk. Isn't that nice? Yeah. And lesions. That was left out of the Monsanto presentation that got them the good housekeeping, yummy, edible stamp of approval from our Food and Drug Administration. But that was foregone because they had their own people. The head of the Food and Drug Administration came right out of Monsanto. And and this is a bipartisan thing. I mean, the Monsanto is extremely close to both parties, but especially, by the way, the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton was very close to Shapiro, the head of Monsanto, and the head of the FDA was from Monsanto was appointed by Bill Clinton. So you have to understand that and both parties have played footsie with Monsanto, but the problem is that Monsanto is not being straight with us about what they're putting in these frankenfoods.
Well, that's right, and I've always called them mad scientists, and they have the Democrats in their left pocket, Republicans in the right pocket. But let's talk some more about that, because this is a massive revolving door between Monsanto Corporation and positions in the federal government. I mean, isn't this an obvious, apparent, a blatant conflict of interest?
Well, it gets even worse, because there is a world government, don't forget. When we're talking about the World Trade Organization, which controls the trade in Monsanto products, the Monsanto products, which are genetically modified, lab-created DNA, are on, some of those products are on what's called the Codus Alimentarius, which is a list of foods which any nation in the WTO must accept. In other words, a nation can't say, "Ooh, we don't want that BST milk with with pus in it. We don't want that stuff." They can't refuse that stuff, Monsanto products, if it's on this codex. Now, how did they get on the codex with quite dangerous products? The answer is that they got the inside information on the secret codex meetings, which were passed to them by both U.S. and Canadian operatives who were supposedly working for their governments or the World Trade Organization, but in fact were passing secret information to Monsanto so that they could work the lobby and get their robo foods on the international list. So you have to understand, our food supply is controlled by an international organization, the World Trade Organization. What is bought and sold in the United States and considered healthy is determined by in secret meetings by groups that Monsanto has tremendous influence over, and we basically are locked out of the room. So most people don't even realize that our food supply is actually listed for us, what can be sold and not sold by this international organization.
Well, this should be the political discussion in America right now. I think it's very important. I think it's obvious that they want to control the world's food supply. And I'm starting to worry about Hillary Clinton. She looks like she hasn't slept. I think she's getting frustrated. She looks like she's very concerned about feeding African children. The food aid campaign in Africa. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, there you go. I mean, part of her plan is to require African nations to accept genetically modified foods designed and owned by Monsanto, which of course is really disastrous in a place like Africa because those seeds cannot be reused. In other words, for thousands and thousands of years, for millions of years, humans, since we started agriculture, actually tens of thousands of years ago, have reused seed from a prior crop. But if you start using Monsanto products, you have to buy the seeds every year. And in poor nations in Africa, you know, it sounds good. Oh, we'll bring in these miracle high-yield seeds. But it's disastrous for Africans because they can't use their naturally grown seeds. They can't reuse the seeds. So they become kind of slaves, a kind of seed colony of Monsanto. So we're back to a new form of colonialization, except this is genetically modified colonialization, not the old type with guys in pucka shorts and funny hats.
I mean, genetically modified sounds Frankensteinish. Drought resistance sounds really something you want.
So basically, we're letting Monsanto, a care of Hillary Clinton, recolonize Africa. I don't think that's a very good proposition for Africans.
No, they're saying they're doing this so Africa can become food independent, but they're really, in reality, they're becoming dependent on Monsanto, and I think that's the direction they're really going. I was going to say, I cannot believe the money that they're spending on political ads here in America for this food labeling propositions. They're spending $3 million opposing GMO labeling in Oregon, $4.7 million in Colorado. And I tell you what, Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, he'd be proud at some of these ads because they're complete with, oh, you know, it's a typical cowboy, farmer wearing a cowboy hat, the concerned doctor or the smiling teacher, and they're telling everybody to stand with family farmers and vote no on GMO labeling.
Agriculture is crucial to Colorado's economy. Proposition 105 would hurt Colorado food producers by forcing them to use misleading labels that conflict with national standards. Please stand with Colorado's farmers and vote no on 105.
What do you think about all these ads that they're running on television right now?
What they're telling you is don't label products that have genetically modified ingredients. Don't label them. They are arguing in favor of voluntary stupidity. They want to, in other words, stupidity is a profit center in America. The dumber the consumer, the dumber the citizen, the more junk they can sell you. And they're actually asking people to say, don't allow a farmer to say, this does not have genetically modified products in what I'm selling. So for example, in Vermont, you're not allowed by US law. You can't say that your product is using GMO-free milk. You can't do it in the United States. You're not allowed to actually say that. You're muzzled. The First Amendment does not apply to food labeling. So for example, Ben & Jerry's, to get around the prohibition on saying our ice cream doesn't have GMO milk in it, says, oh, we are part of a GMO-free organization. And every member of the GMO-free organization doesn't use GMO products. It's a way to get around the label police at the FDA. Now, at the state level, they're trying to stop any products from being labeled with their actual ingredients. Can you imagine? They're actually trying to make it against the law to put the true ingredients inside the box on the outside of the box. So Monsanto wants you to vote to be stupid, to not know what's in the box. You know, if their products were so wonderful, if they were so safe, you would think that they'd want to say GMO modified ingredients, genetically modified ingredients inside. Yummy, yummy. You'll want this. Because if it's such a good idea, it's so healthy, people will clamor for it. It should raise their sales to be properly labeled. But they know. They know.
Of course they know. And
fool.
not only
buying something safe that way.
That's right. And not only have they infiltrated our federal government, but they also control the federal courts as well. They are above the law. Now they have liability protection, no thanks to Obama, through the Monsanto Protection Act. And what's to stop these guys? And I'm surprised, where are the liberals right now? Because a lot of the liberals, they're not making a fuss about this. I'm just trying to imagine if George W. Bush, if he signed off on the Monsanto Protection Act, wouldn't they be screaming about that?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is that, I mean, Monsanto is very smart. A really smart corporation understands you don't favor one party over another. You don't put your bet on one horse. Mm-hmm. You buy the racetrack. You fix the house, okay? And Monsanto is very sharp in making sure that they just load up the Democratic Party with cash. And they've been huge supporters, especially of the Clintons. And the FDA has been genetically modified at Monsanto's request. Mostly, I mean, the Bush administration had their hand in these games with Monsanto, but nothing close to what the Clintons did. And I think that a lot of Democrats who are sitting there eating bean sprout sandwiches and making sure their kids have, that they buy things that are organic, and they go to Whole Foods and they pay triple. I think that they would be shocked to find out that, in fact, a lot of those products that they think are wonderful and organic and free of any manipulation are, in fact, Frankenstein foods that are not properly labeled, care of the Clintons.
That's right.
It's a big problem. I mean, this is the problem of pretend partisanship. They own both parties, and that's what I guess a party is for.
No American will ever be able to seriously say again, my vote doesn't count.
24 hours after the polls closed, we still don't know who won, Al Gore or George Bush. And we will not know until tomorrow at the earliest.
You're the one, you broke the story about the election fraud during the 2000 election, in which Choice Point, they had their hand in stealing the election for George W. Bush in Florida. And now Choice Point has a no-bid contract with the Department of Homeland Security. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, just back in 2000, a company called Choice Point and its unit, the Database Technologies. These are the early beginnings of the cyber spying, which is now gone completely berserk in America. Choice Point was keeping files on every American, and they got a no-bid contract from Jeb Bush's Florida government and Catherine Harris to hunt for illegal voters on the voter rolls, people that had supposedly committed felonies and aren't allowed to vote. And they tagged about 58,000 people. Turns out most of them were African-American men who simply had common names like Joe Black and Joe White and John Johnson. By the way, there are 86,020 John Johnsons in America. Or I should say John Jacksons in America. 53% of them are African American. One of them has probably committed a felony crime. That doesn't mean that the guy in Florida voting named John Jackson was also a felon. Turns out none of these people were guilty of anything but voting while black. They lost their vote. George Bush was elected president. Whether you like that outcome or not, it wasn't done by a vote of the people. It was done by a vote of this company, Choice Point, which provided the computer scrub lists for Catherine Harris. What was their payoff? They ended up with a fat, multi-billion, no-bid contract with the Department of Homeland Security. So they went from falsely tagging African-American voters as criminals to keeping track on you. And it was the beginning of the program. They used to call the program Total Information Awareness. Yep. And they had a pyramid with the all-seeing eye. And the all-seeing eye was this company, Choice Point, which figured out that if you set yourself out to hire, to manipulate elections, when you elect your boys, then they pay you off in fat contracts. It's about the money. It's really not a partisan question. It's a question of cash. As I always say, we don't have a two-party system. We have a one-party system. The party is Hezbollah Shekel, which is the party of the cash. That's what's going on. and now it's continued into this election, too, in the new form.
Well, didn't Choice Point, aren't they international now? Because I've heard they're stealing elections.